Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully some more people come in as we get started. My name is Evan Clark. I'm Executive Director of Atheists United. We are seller. Oh, thank you. We have a very exciting program for you today. We have a speaker that's not normally in Los Angeles that's here for us, and we finally get to have our choir back. For those of you that don't know, Atheists United's had a choir for coming up on 2 decades one of these days, and they have performed incredible music over the years for us and many communities across the country. And when we're able to host them, it's a great honor. So Voices of Reason will be performing 3 songs. But real quickly, before we get started, I just want to thank some of the volunteers that made today possible. They've been here for hours this morning, like Christine and others, and Yari and Katie, and sound setup. For those of you that have never been to an in-person event here at Heretic House before, the bathroom is on the first floor here, just through those doors. There are multiple people. I think almost everyone here has been to this house before and can answer questions for you. For those of you on the live feed, thank you for joining, and please put some comments on the Facebook feed if you're having trouble with audio, and we'll do our best to make that work. Real quick, before we get started, I also just want to give you a really cool announcement. Atheists United, we have always been active in California, especially Los Angeles. We broke off from American Atheists in 1982. Most people don't know the long history of Atheists United, but we had a dispute with Madalyn Murray O'Hara, which was founder of American Atheists, and it was a really intense dispute back in the day. Those people didn't work together for decades. Well, they've had new leadership for about 3 or 4 years now, and we reaffiliated with them. And Christine and I attended the American Atheist National Conference in Georgia this past weekend. And to our surprise, we won Affiliate of the Year. We are the top group in America, according to American Atheists. So I just want to thank everyone that made this possible. If you'd like to take a picture with this later, I think that's awesome. Yeah, this really kind of shows the hard work we've put in. I was hired 3 years ago to help turn around this community, and this is just hopefully the first of many awards we get along the way of becoming the biggest and boldest community in America. So thank you all for that. Good work. Great. If you've never checked out our stuff before, head to atheistunited.org. We're about to put our annual report from last year up there. We hosted over 300 events. We launched 6 new programs during the pandemic. We're definitely one of the largest, if not the largest and most active community in America. And yeah, we just hope you can join us as we kind of figure out this awkward post-COVID world we're in, still COVID world we're in, as we come back to in-person events. But I'll get off the stage. I want to introduce Voices of Reason, our very own choir here in Los Angeles. And they're going to perform 3 songs for you. Hopefully not with a lawnmower going, but we'll see. All right, come on down.
All right, man. All right, quiet. Turn on your microphones.
Yeah.
This might make me look bad.
So normally in Atheists United, when we talk about cult, it's not a good thing, but we're going to talk about a good cult today. This is a cult classic from Monty Python's Meaning of Life, which, by the way, this film, Meaning of Life, only grossed about 15% of what the Mel Gibson comedy Passion of Christ brought in. But the meaning of life actually did explain the meaning of life, and it was a hell of a lot funnier. So this is from Monty Python's The Meaning of Life.
Thanks, Daniel. So this is the first time that our choir is going to be performing with these microphones. We're going to try and sing over all of the beautiful LA noise in this beautiful city. And I also wanted to say a special happy birthday to our choir member, Leonard. It's his 50th birthday today. Oh my God, can you believe it? The guy looks 20. We need to know his secrets. All right, here we go. Okay, now back to in-person.
There are Jews in the world, there are Buddhists, there are Hindus and Mormons, and there are those that follow Mohammed, but I've never been one of them. I'm Roman Catholic, and I had to since before I was born. And the fun they say about Catholics is they'll take you as soon as you're born.
No, we got out of time. No, I'm starting our event. We got out of time. Let's try it. Let's try it one more time.
Timer.
Try and look at that. Try and look at the time.
Got it. This is Hollywood. They're used to retakes. They're just student
That's right.
audiences.
Yeah.
Just take two. Yeah.
Good call.
Forward.
Good
Okay.
call.
1, 2, 3.
There are Jews in the world, there are Buddhists, there are Hindus and Mormons, and there are those that follow Mohammed, but I've never been one of them. I'm a Roman Catholic, and had since before I was born. And the one thing they say about Catholics is they'll take you as soon as you're born. You don't have to be a 6'1". You don't have to have a big brain. You don't have to have any clothes on. You're a Catholic the moment that came. Because every sperm is sacred, every sperm is great. If a sperm is wasted, God gets quite irate. Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is great. If the sperm is wasted, God gets quite irate. And the demons spilled it on the dusty road. God should make them know His sperm can't be found. Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is great. Every sperm is great. God gets Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is great. If the sperm is wasted, God gets quite irate. Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is good. Every sperm is needed in your neighborhood. Every sperm is useful, every sperm is fine. God needs everybody's mine and mine. And mine. Let the heathen spill theirs on mountain, hill, and plain. God shall strike them down for each sperm that spills in vain. Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is good, every sperm is needed in your neighborhood. Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is great. Every sperm is wasted, God gets quite irate. 25 years ago, there was lots of turmoil at that time. We're going to commemorate that. It's the time when the U.S. Congress passed a law that titled the Defense of Marriage Act, which said it was limiting marriage only to be legal between a man and a woman. Of course, 9 years after that law was passed, it was nullified by the Supreme Court. Those were the good old days. This is Defenders of Marriage.
On cue, he's great. Every time we think about same-sex marriage, it hits us sick to our guts. What are they nuts?
It's unnatural.
No imaginable person who's a guy. We're defenders of marriage. Breathe but suits. Raises all the standards and Hebrews salutes. Defenders of marriage. Defending the institution against people who want to get married. Every time we think about same-sex marriage, oh my gosh, we explain. I mean, to people who want to provide a protective and nurturing family environment, have their shame. It's so to choose the Lord. It's my second website to my third. Families based on obligation and fear. We're defenders of marriage. Renew your hearts. Vigilant and patriotic matriarchs. Defenders of marriage. Defending the institution against people who want to get married.
One summer evening when my woman was doing laundry, I shared a six-pack with an old John Bircher. And also wisely he imparted an ancient quandary. To ponder, he said it's nature. Versus legislature.
We're an army of dicks with a militant stance. Attempt to get into our pants. Defenders of marriage. Defending the institution against people who want to get married.
I'd have fair insurance carry. I'd be beneficiary. I'd be next to the one we love when they are
Bound to
Well, as Evan said, this choir wouldn't be here without the sustaining funds and support of Atheists United, and we thank you for that. What you're seeing here is the largest a cappella atheist choir in the United States. It should be larger, don't you think? So this is where we need your help of everybody here and at home. If you know of anyone who can carry a tune, loves to sing atheist type songs, please contact one of us or go to atheist or voicesofreason.net. That's voicesofreason.net. Also, I want to say a special thanks to our directors, Katie Sharp and Yari Schuster. This next song is based on a song from Dan Parker at FFRF. It's called Beware of Dogma.
Somebody pay him.
Next month we'll be doing the Weed Eater Sonata.
It's percussion. That's all. Beware of dogma. It has a bite. Beware of dogma. It wants a fight. Beware of dogma. It will ignite a holy war. By itself. Beware of dogma. It traps your mind. Religious dogma. It makes you blind. Beware of dogma. It's not designed to let you think for yourself. If you let it dogma in the universe, there will be no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. Everything is worse. Don't let it loose. The ancient dogma will reproduce. There's no excuse for ignorance anymore. Beware of dogma. Don't let it loose. Their ancient dogma. It'll reproduce. Tie up your dogma. There's no excuse for ignorance anymore. More.
Thank you.
Thanks. Turn off your mics.
Oh, yeah, mic's on before you go to the toilet. Turn off your mic.
More information I need.
That's the problem.
Hey, I haven't seen you forever.
I don't know who you are. Does that
Yeah.
ask?
All right, thank you, everyone.
my
In the
God.
choir, Voices of Reason. If you'd like to join, I believe they mentioned it, but one more time, that's voicesofreason.net. You can also find them through our website, atheistsunited.org. All right, hope you're excited for a speaker event today. For those of you in the community, you heard Anya speak only a few months ago, it feels like. This pandemic, I don't remember when anything was anymore, but Anya happened to be coming through Los Angeles as we've been relaunching our in-person events, so we are thrilled to be hosting her again. Anya is the president of Young Humanists International and has held multiple roles in the American Ethical Union, specifically in its youth section. She was raised in the ethical culture movement and attended the Ethical Culture Society in St. Louis since she was a young child. Anya runs a business as a writer, and she currently lives as a digital nomad, living and working wherever she wanders. Her passion lies in advocating vigorously for humanist and progressive values, both within and beyond the United States. And she's got a talk for us today titled Colombia, the US, and the Global Fight for Atheist Representation. Help me in welcoming Anya.
How's everybody doing today?
Good. We're here.
Excellent. All right. I'm just gonna get my stuff pulled up here and then I'll get going. All right, so as Evan said, I'm Anya Overmann. I'm originally from St. Louis. I grew up attending the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and I'm now the president of Young Humanists International. I'm grateful to have been invited to speak here today about something I think all of us would like to see more of, which is atheist representation. But first, like Evan said, I'm a digital nomad, which means that I can work remotely from anywhere in the world, as long as I have a Wi-Fi connection. So in other words, I travel the world while running my writing business. And with this lifestyle, I have this very unique opportunity to make exploration of new cultures a part of my everyday life. And as a result, I learn a lot of really interesting things about secularism outside of the US. Recently, I spent time in a country that separates church and state and has no official religion. And that is in the Constitution, in fact. But this country still privileges Christianity. That sure does sound like the US, doesn't it? But I'm actually talking about Colombia. You know, the country in South America that you may associate with drug cartels and corruption. That reputation, by the way, is about 30 years stale. Colombia has changed a lot since then, and it's a beautiful place. Medellin, for example, which was the murder capital of the world in 1993, is now a hipster holiday destination. It's called the City of Eternal Spring, and it is vibrant, lush, and warm all year round. One day a couple of months ago, I was shopping at a grocery store in Medellin when this book caught my eye. It said, En defensa del humanismo. I did a double take. Did that really say in defense of humanism here in a country where 73% of the population is Catholic? There are definitely atheists and humanists in Colombia. I'm friends with some of them, but I did not expect to see a book about humanism for sale in such a well-trafficked store. Now, one thing you need to understand about me is that I usually only purchase digital books because I live out of just a backpack and a duffel bag. Physical books are heavy and bulky, but seeing this book in the store was just so captivating, I just had to buy the physical copy. So I figured at the very least, this book would be good Spanish reading practice for me, which I very much need. So the author of this book is Alejandro Gaviria Uribe. He was the Minister of Health and Social Protection in Colombia for about 6 years. In an interview back in April 2017, he publicly came out as atheist. This caused a lot of backlash. Another politician named Alejandro Ordóñez even called for his resignation based on an accusation that he was, quote, promoting the culture of death, unquote, as a non-believer. I know. And he said, he asked the Colombians rhetorically, would you leave the health and the education of your family in the hands of an atheist? You gain an understanding of just how cruel of a question this really is when you learn that Gaviria is a survivor of non-Hodgkin lymphatic cancer, a condition that has been linked to carcinogenic herbicide called glyphosate, used to kill coca plants in Colombia. Now, Gaviria actually helped end this dangerous practice of aerial fumigation with this chemical, which, by the way, had been funded by the US for the past 30 years. Gaviria remained at his post until 2018, and as acknowledged in the Humanists International's Freedom of Thought report, which is revised every year and is a fantastic report, you should totally check it out. Anyway, they said he is credited with fighting for women's reproductive rights and regulating the cost of medicine, among other achievements. He was even a candidate in this year's Colombian presidential election, but he did not make it past the primaries. Now, the back cover of this book, En Defensa del Humanismo, roughly translates to English as a collection of speeches Gaviria has given and some reflections on the environment, the future of Colombia, the culture around how we view life, the pain through the pandemic, and a little bit at the end about how we view our capacity to dream. I noted only one instance in the 125 pages of this book that Gaviria references his secularist leanings. This singular instance is a story about how he offered to read the novena prayer, which for those unfamiliar with Catholic tradition, myself included, I am not familiar at all. It is a devotional prayer often recited in preparation for a feast day. He offered to read this prayer during a Christmas Eve gathering with his family. And when he finished reading the prayer, he raised his hand and he announced that the prayer was missing something. And that in this case, it was missing the words from the secular Cuban poet Alicio Diego. He then shared a poem titled El Día de los Otros, the Day of the Others. As Gaviria describes it, the poem is about what happens in the world after death, about the tomorrow of others, about the world without our presence. Now, I love this anecdote. As someone with Catholic family members, I have a solid appreciation of stories where someone takes the opportunity to add just a dash of spicy secularism to the absurd Catholic traditions that their family upholds. But it's certainly not a story that Colombian Catholic voters delight in as much as I do. Much like in the US, the legal separation of church and state does not stop the majority of Colombians from believing that those who don't follow God shouldn't be political leaders. Now, remember earlier when I told you that Colombia has changed a lot in the past 30 years? In 1991, Colombia revised its constitution to remove all references to the Catholic Church, which was the official religion between 1886 and 1936. It declared all faiths and churches equally free before the law. And this revision gave Colombians the broad right to individual autonomy and general freedom of action according to their own beliefs, limited only by the rights of others. It also included freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and it banned censorship. Now that sounds kind of familiar, right? Well, after the backlash Gaviria received from outing himself as an atheist, I can really understand why he included only one direct reference to his secularism in this book about humanism. You simply cannot untell very religious people that you're an atheist. You can't go back into the closet. That label sticks, and it doesn't stick in a good way in very religious society. Now, I get it, and you probably get it too. Gaviria just wants Colombians to understand that Catholicism and religion in general are not prerequisites for living with ethics, but he is hampered by the taboo around atheism. Non-religious people are still very much discriminated against in Colombia. The Freedom of Thought report notes Colombia as having social marginalization of the non-religious or stigma associated with expressing atheism, humanism, or secularism, and that discriminatory prominence is given to religious bodies, traditions, or leaders. So rather than expressing atheism, Gaviria opted to write his reflections on the shared tragic experiences of the pandemic and climate change. It's hard not to relate to the pain and suffering he describes. He speaks of the human experience eloquently. As an engineer and economist, Gaviria is impressively poetic, which you learn in the book is inspired by his admiration for several Latin American poets. By the way, this story ends with me donating this book to the Heritage House Library, so you will be able to check it out yourselves if you'd like. I have a lot of respect for him writing this book, especially as he probably knew that he didn't have a good chance at winning the presidency. By the way, the election is May 29th, that's about a month from now, and Gaviria, he didn't make it past the primaries, so he doesn't have a shot at this point. Colombia, it just doesn't seem ready for a non-religious president. Like the US, Colombia behaves as a secular state in name only. And while Colombia is more religious and stigmatizes atheism to a harsher degree than the US, the Freedom of Thought report rates both Colombia and the US at the level of systemic discrimination when it comes to family, community, and society. Opinion polls have regularly suggested, in fact, that most US citizens would be less likely to vote for a presidential candidate if they were atheist. And one survey indicated that, quote, no other trait, including being gay or having never held elected office, garnered a larger share of people saying they'd be less likely to support the political candidate. So if you're atheist, it's a steep climb for you in your political career. So it's really, really unlikely that either the US or Colombia will elect an atheist as president anytime soon. But we have had non-religious public officials here in the US before. There was an atheist in Congress for 40 years. Pete Stark was the first openly atheist member of Congress. He served as a US representative from California's 13th congressional district in Oakland from 1973 to 2013, which, in my opinion, way too long for anyone to fill an elected position, but I digress. In 2008, the American Humanists Association named Pete Stark Humanist of the Year, and he served on their advisory board. He introduced a bill to Congress designating February 12, 2011 as Darwin Day, and in the same year was one of 8 lawmakers who voted to reject the national motto, "In God We Trust." Like Gaviria, Stark suffered from cancer, but unfortunately he died from his leukemia in early 2020. So what about now? Who do we have in the way of influential secular folks in the US government? Representative Jamie Raskin from Maryland is a darling of the US secular community, especially after leading the second impeachment against Trump. He has become a vocal advocate for secularism in Congress. Raskin launched the Congressional Free Thought Caucus in April 2018 with the support of the AHA and the Center for Free Thought Equality. But Jamie Raskin himself does not identify as non-religious. He identifies as Reform Jewish. Is that label important? Well, no, not really. The work he's doing for secularism and free thought is far more notable. But there is something different about wearing the identity atheist as a public servant. There's stigma. It's a heavier, pardon the pun, cross to bear. Surveys have shown that 60% of US citizens and 75% of evangelicals have a less favorable view of atheists than most other belief groups. Most US Americans still don't trust non-religious people with authority. And perhaps that is why the other notable secular advocate in Congress, Senator Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona, had realized when she decided to wear a cross on her neck during legislation on voting rights. Rather than shining as this beacon of pride for the 23% of US Americans who identify as religiously unaffiliated, Sinema has taken stances in Congress that have brought shame to the secular community. Most recently, she and Senator Joe Manchin blocked a Democrat-led effort to return to the talking filibuster so that the Freedom to Vote and John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Acts could pass. And these ultimately failed by a vote of 48 to 52. Now, that was a massive blow to voting rights in the US. And Sinema decided to cross party lines to hit us with these restrictions on our rights while wearing a cross for the first time publicly as a senator. This is some choice messaging by someone who held so much power in the outcome of landmark legislation. Sinema lost a lot of donors and support because of this, and it serves her right. I can certainly relate to the atheist frustration with religious people who equate a lack of belief with a lack of morality and therefore a lack of ability to lead. But what's possibly more frustrating than that is when secular influencers actually behave as if they lack a moral compass. Sinema seems to have no problem playing roles that serve her, including wearing the identity of religious nun, but only when it's useful for her. So that begs the question, does aligning with non-religious values mean political death? When a religious majority has such an ill view towards atheists in power, their perceived higher power has more influence in elections than secular thinking. Then we are left with societies that legally separate church and state, but still privilege believers in power. Yet despite those realities, research has shown that the happiest nations on earth are also among the most secular. Based on an analysis of a host of sociological, economic, and psychological factors, the nation that is currently the happiest on earth for the 5th year in a row is Finland. Following Finland in the top 10 are Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Sweden, Norway, Israel, and New Zealand. Now, aside from Israel, which is growing more religious and less democratic, all of these top 10 happiest nations have experienced dramatic shifts into secularization over the last century. And as Phil Zuckerman notes in his article about the same thing on Only Sky, with their extensive systems of welfare capitalism, they experience the highest degrees of freedom in the world while also the lowest levels of inequality. But there's good news. With 29% of US adults identifying as religious nuns, up from 16% 15 years ago, the nation certainly seems like it's on the right path to accepting more non-religious political leaders. Latin America, too, shows trends of declining Catholicism, while secularism, but also evangelicalism, are on the rise. Religious nuns, or ningunas, have quadrupled over the last 25 years to make up 16% of the population in Latin America. And these ningunas are largely a population of young people. So Latin America's collective population of non-religious people has grown in 25 years to what the US population of non-religious people was 15 years ago. With any hope, both of these growth trends will continue. It seems we're headed toward broader cultural acceptance of non-religious public servants in the Americas, but we should certainly count on it being met with resistance from evangelicals. And Defensa del Humanismo was more than just good Spanish practice for me. It was a reminder that living good without a God still poses significant challenges as a leader. Living good without a God will often leave you dismissed as unethical by religious society. It's something you have to defend against constantly if you want to obtain and maintain political authority. But then there are secular people of influence like cinema who do behave unethically, bad without a God, if you will, thus fulfilling the very stereotype that many of us would like to dispel. I dream of days when national populations will trust the ethical non-religious to govern without posturing to the religious. I hope I'm still alive when religious identity is no longer viewed as a qualification to fill a role as a public servant in the US, and openly identifying as non-religious is no longer viewed by the majority as untrustworthy. At least for now, I can say I'm grateful that atheism isn't nearly as stigmatized in the US culture as it is in Colombia. That's something we should all appreciate. Thank you for listening to me talk today. I hope you will all eventually tune in to my podcast, which I'm working on with Atheists United. It's called The Nomadic Humanist. We're recording our last episode tomorrow, and then hopefully we'll have edits going and it will be available at the end of the summer. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll do Q&A here for about 10 to 15 minutes. We don't have that big a crowd. I'd like to let people shout out.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Any
Got
questions?
any questions? Yeah.
As can you just repeat them? I've never heard. I've been following Clinton for a while.
Yeah.
And plus, the voting rights from the South.
Okay.
So that should speak for itself. Did she ever was she ever pressed on that she was cross when she voted against the John Lewis voting rights bill? Was that ever addressed? Because I hadn't heard anything.
No.
Can you repeat the question?
Let's see, can we repeat that question?
Okay, Christine's got it.
Was Cinema ever pressed on wearing the cross when she crossed to the other side of the aisle and voted against the John Lewis voting rights bill? Was she ever questioned about it?
You know, I didn't follow up on that to see what the pushback was, but I imagine so. I think secular communities were really upset about that. I mean, she had so much support from secular communities when she got elected, and this really, I mean, she kind of pulled the rug out from her community. So yeah, I would imagine there was some pressure back, but I would have to go and do my research on that to answer that fully for you.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that she was. So she identifies as atheist.
She identifies as religiously unaffiliated.
Oh,
I
okay.
believe she actually grew up as Mormon, but she is not anymore. She's unaffiliated.
Yeah, I mean, I was aware that what she was. I think it's well known that she is part of the LGBTQ plus community.
That's right.
But otherwise, I had no idea about. Well, she's in Arizona. Arizona's pretty conservative too. I would imagine maybe that's part of it. But
It's really hard to say because she had very strong support from Democrats in Arizona. And actually, I mean, Evan can probably speak to this better than I can because he's been involved in that, the secular politics scene in Arizona. But I mean, it's shocking, right? I mean, she really pulled the rug out from under all the secular people that were raising her up. So it's pretty disappointing.
Hello, question back here. I think it's our proximity to the stand-up
Yeah, so when we say someone's non-religious, I feel like there are people that say, oh, I'm not religious, but I just believe in God. Does that count as a 23%? I know people say spiritual, whatnot, but what about when they just say believe in God? They think of it as a religious institution affiliation, but not, what is that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different, I'm sure you're all familiar, there's a lot of different things along this spectrum of religious and non-religious that you can kind of call yourself, right? And because these surveys are people that are self-identifying, yes, that's entirely possible that they could identify as unaffiliated but still have some sort of spiritual belief. That's possible. But I think that the majority of people, when they select that thing, are not associated with any sort of religious group. They're just, they're choosing based on identity and community. They're not thinking specifically about their spiritual beliefs and how that might translate onto paper, because it is really hard when you're picking a demographic and there's not like a very specific spiritual name for your beliefs, and you're just, you know, you're trying to pick a demographic to land on in a little, you know, round bubble, you know. So yeah, it could very well be that there are spiritual people included in that population of 23% for sure.
Here we go. Oh, there it is.
You just had to hit
It's cutting in and out.
How are the Central and South American countries, other than Colombia, tracking in terms of atheists and politics?
It's a similar type of trend. I'm not as intimately familiar with the politics in each nation in Latin America. I have been to Guatemala, I've been to Mexico. There is a really large evangelical population in Guatemala. There's been a huge push in Guatemala specifically for missionary work and evangelical building of church. And holy moly, they have some big evangelical churches in Guatemala City. So yeah, it's interesting because as Catholicism is on this descent in Latin America, secularism is on the rise, but alongside it is this evangelical rise as well. So it's interesting to kind of watch that happen. And you know, we'll kind of see over the next probably 20 years how this plays out, whether, you know, evangelicals are going to kind of take the reins from the Catholics and really take over in terms of leadership, or if young people will really kind of prevail and bring this really secular revolution to their governance. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. In my estimation, based on the populations in Latin America being skewed younger, and because the younger people tend to be more left-leaning and progressive and non-religious, my assumption and prediction is that they will trend more towards secular. Yeah.
Okay, here.
All right. I have a question as I'm not sure everyone's aware of it, but in Latin America and South America, there's a class stratification is very pronounced. So are these numbers where they're increasing? Is it contained solely in the upper class, the well-to-do category, or is it reaching all the way down to the lower groups and even the indigenous folks?
This is a really, really good question. From what I have read, it mostly seems like this is really correlated to people that are going into university and they're getting a post-secondary education, and they're getting exposure to, you know, progressive values and non-religious culture. Just having that exposure really, really changes things. I don't feel comfortable saying that reaches into indigenous populations or the lower class strata. I don't think that it's impacting the communities in the same way outside of the academia realm.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, because I think you kind of answered it. So are there really efforts being made by those people in academia and the upper class to reach down to those other groups and even possibly extend a hand to people who may hold to more traditional beliefs, their native beliefs, which are kind of actually more aligned in a lot of ways with humanism and, you know, coming back to a more holistic view of society and whatnot?
So yes, there are efforts being made to do outreach within Latin America. I'm aware currently of a project in Peru where they're trying to develop basically some talking speaker series circuits in various universities outside of Lima. So just for some reference, Lima's just a big giant city in Peru where, you know, all the cool things happen, very left leaning and, you know, that typical urban area. So they're trying to spread humanism outside of Lima and trying to get more people in the country aware and exposed to it. Again, this is all very university focused. They're really relying on academics to help facilitate the spread of humanism, because these are very, like, a lot of these are really philosophical questions. So people feel comfortable answering that in an academic space. When you reframe it to kind of challenge religion, I think that's when people become a lot more uncomfortable and less willing to show up and engage. So I believe that's why they're taking that approach. I think they feel more comfortable in the university setting, and they know that they're more likely to get support there than outside of that context. I'm hoping that will change over time, though.
That's what the people are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anybody else?
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Anya.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. This will be in the library if anybody wants to check it out.
Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for coming out. On your way out, if you have not renewed your membership with Atheists United, it's time to renew. We are American Atheist Affiliate of the Year. I think it's a great time to renew. We also have new membership levels. Maybe since you've been here a few years ago, we now have $2 a month levels that didn't exist a few years ago. So very accessible to become a member of Atheists United. And if you're not a member yet, we do have a suggested donation of $10 for today's event. These are all volunteer put on other than me. So yeah, thank you for being here, and eat all the snacks. We brought a bunch of snacks for you. We'd love your help getting rid of them. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Where are they? For upstairs, up on the patio or whatever. Yeah. Patio deck.
Dinner with a small group of people tonight.
The mezzanine.
I'm here.
The mezzanine.
Good.
Evan, you might want to ask about putting away the chairs.
Little things here and there. Nothing extravagant.
My back is
Yeah, let me tell you, after 50, it was all about the things, I think. You know, staying on top of things. Got to me about mid-40s. Okay, happening.
Been doing to entertain yourself.
But like I made this.